Here we've got a BMW M3 V8 engine, S65, found in the E92 M3, that's been sent to us all the way from Jamaica to the UK. It's got a problem where it won't start and it won't turn over by hand, so it's been sent to us for investigation and find out what the problem is, and then obviously hopefully go forward and carry out a repair or fix. So just going to document what happens during the investigation stage and diagnosis work. I've taken the wrapping off. There doesn't look to be any great damage at the moment. Very good wood stabilisation. Someone's already had a go at turning this over because the crank 32 is deformed, but it won't turn over, so it is effectively seized. Just had a quick look in the inlets, taken that newspaper out, and there is corrosion around the valves and the valve seats, which isn't ideal. That's going to struggle to seat, I'd imagine. Could possibly cause a misfire if the valve stays open minutely. It almost looks like sort of white salt crystals as well. Just that newspaper in there. It's definitely come from Jamaica, I'd imagine, this engine. JamaicanObserver.com. Just taking the oil filter out. It is dry in there, so it's been out before and allowed that to drain down. There is a lot of metallic particles in there, which have got a coppery sort of shade to them. I've just taken them, just put my finger around the side of the oil filter housing, and you can see them, all the metallic particles collecting there on the glove. They are coppery sort of coloured. Don't actually mean it's copper material, it just could be stained that way because of the oil that it's been sat in, but it's definitely metallic and obviously shouldn't be in the oil system. So more and more looking like some form of bearing breakup. These engines are known for conrod bearing breakup, so the next stage is going to be sump off and investigate the bottom end. So we know it's come from a DCT car because of the flywheel, and although the flywheel could have been changed, there is a date stamp of June 2011, suggesting it's a fairly late car, 2011. And also both cylinder heads are showing June 2011 and June 2011. So I've got the engine suspended now on the load levelling system, just taking it off the pallet so we can put it onto a mounting cradle. Got a genuine BMW brand new mounting cradle there, which is specifically for the S65 engine mounting on the rear of the engine. That's what it looks like when it's installed. We weld them directly to pivoting system. There's another one there, 2011 DCT, again, conrod bearing shell failure on this one. Well, not this one, this is the replacement engine, it's having the upgrades, but it's out of the car due to a 2010-2011 failure. So we'll get this mounted up now and then see what's going on underneath. So we've got a custom bracket sorted now and welded to our engine stand, which allows us to mount that, wheel that around the workshop, and also we can turn the engine over and work on it at any position of the 360 degrees, which we're going to do now, and take that sump off and see what's inside the bottom end of the engine. So turn the engine upside down so we can access the sump, and that's free floating on the stand. We can access any part of the engine safely. And we can get that sump finally undone and see what's inside. The sump pan's removed now from the S65, and we can straight away see that we've got a lot of metallic debris in the bottom of the sump, especially down in the pickup. This is at the front for the front oil pump pickup. Lots of nasty metal that you wouldn't want floating around in your engine oil. Some of these are particles and sort of shavings, and then some of them are actually chunks which are hard. You can't really press them because they're quite sharp, and your fingers, they would cut you. They're not very soft at all. So straight away that tells us we've got some big problems. The sump is just littered with metal particles, and then that's pretty much the same on the engine. For instance, at the back there's some small areas, some are sort of gold, some are copper, some are silver, and that doesn't necessarily mean the material, it's just the colour and stains that it's got due to it being sat in engine oil. But the engine oil in general is very clean. You can see through the oil there, it's not burnt or tarnished. A lot of these components are still in original colourings and conditions, but then it's a 2011 vehicle. We don't know the mileage yet, we're waiting for the customer to confirm the mileage and the scenario of actually what happened, but the engine is seized. It will not turn over on the crank, and we can tell that there's a problem on up at the front end. The front two conrods, and then also the third one back as well, has started to go a dark colour and actually got very hot. And before we look a little bit closer, just going to show you more of the particles that we're finding. Like I say, quite big pieces, probably the biggest ones we've seen. We do conrod bearing replacements on these S65 and 85s, the V8 and V10s, because of wear and going through the copper, and sometimes you'll get really small fine particles like these ones in the oil filter and the oil filter housing, and that's what alerts us to there being a fairly rapid wear which needs changing immediately. But actually to see chunks and break up, that is the bearing that's broken up to that extent. Chain at the moment is all intact, everything's in its correct place. The crank ledge is still held down, there don't seem to be any loose bolts and no gaps between the block and the lower crank housing. So looking a bit closer on the first two conrods, see they've changed colour, they've got extremely hot. We haven't yet checked, we can't actually access them, so we haven't checked for any sort of play in them. They're obviously at TDC, therefore at the central point of the engine, so it's actually hard to get through those webs to actually access them. You can see the particles on the side of the counterweights on the crank. It's going to be harder to see, but it's actually shavings there where the bearing is sort of just been rotated and shaved into pieces, hanging out the side of that second conrod there. Upsquirting jets still look intact and in the correct position compared to the other ones. More swarf down at the back. You can also see the bore liners are badly scratched where this engine is actually seized. Whether it's been seized whilst driving, we're not entirely sure, or whether it was simply driven a long way with the problem and then switched off, and then heat expansion or something has allowed it to almost fuse together. We're not entirely sure, but it hasn't broken any of the bolts nor the caps. The rods are in fairly original looking condition, although we can't actually see the sides of them or check for any bending or validity. But there's no holes in the side of the block, nothing's actually broken away. It's just at the moment, until we strip down any more, it's looking like just bearing failure, but probably not noticed quick enough, I'm afraid to say, because it's done so much damage on these bearings. And look at that sharp jagged metal edge, and I believe it's the same on this side, poking out there and there. So, sort of at the bottom of the screen now, near that upsquirting jet, another part of the bearing that's been pushed out the side. There doesn't seem to be much bearing material hanging out the third conrod, third from the front, but you can see it's got darker, and so is the crank journal near the base or the centre line of the crank, compared to the colourings and conditions of the rest of the crank and what you'd expect. So the heat or the problem is all started at the front of the engine, and now it is seized. We cannot turn this over even with a breaker bar. So there's not much more we can do at this stage unless the customer is to authorise a full strip down, but it's quite obvious the main problems, and also the fact that it scored those liners and bore, that minimum it's going to need a new crankshaft, more than likely a block, Probably rods, at least 3 rods maybe, depending on how well the testing was to go. Piston ring set, yeah, those are the things just off the top of my head. Obviously gasket set as well, so we just it's quite significant damage, and quite surprised it hasn't really broken a conrod cap and put a conrod out through the side of the block. Actually, it's quite significant damage. And if you wanted to know what it looked like in the front oil pump pickup, here's just carnage. Huge amounts of shavings of conrod bearing shell stuck in the sieve, and that's the pieces and particles that haven't gone through. Obviously smaller fine pieces definitely has gone through the oil pump and through the oil galleries, probably all the way through the heads and probably to the Vanos system, because let's face it, the oil's going to get everywhere, and so are those fine little particles which are just like dust.